for the location of the project. And under federal tax law, the host cities have to hold a public hearing and provide its consent by resolution. And so before the council is both the resolution providing that consent under state law and under federal tax law, and as well as a form of joint powers agreement, which is a very simple agreement that's entered into between the city of New Prague, the city of Rosemount as host cities, as well as the cities of Hampton and Landfall Village, who are the issuers. And essentially, the joint powers agreement just, provides for consent by New Prague and Rosemount to the issuance of bonds by Hampton and Landfall Village to finance projects that are located in the cities of New Prague and Rosemount. And the issuers then, authorize the issuance of bonds to finance those projects. So, the city of New Prague, as provided in the resolution and the joint powers agreement and under state law and federal tax law, there isn't any liability for the city of New Prague or the other host city for that matter, or the issuers with respect to these bonds. These are conduit revenue bonds, and the bonds are payable from the revenues of the project being financed and any other revenues pledged to the payment of the bonds by the conduit borrower. The issuer is, providing the tax exempt part of this financing, and is able to give the project lower interest rates through the tax exempt financing. That's about it in a nutshell, and I can take any questions that any of the council members may have.
This is Councilmember Rick Seiler. The question I had when this first came up was any prior contracts or any bonds that have been issued, are they fulfilled when the sale happens and the deed changes over? And you already answered my question. You're sure on the no liability, because it seems more like a contract where we're co-signing, and I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. There is no liability. These are conduit revenue bond. This is a conduit revenue bond proposed to be issued. Even if the project encounters financial difficulties, there is, there's no way that any of the bondholders, whoever purchases the bonds, will be able to go after any of the issuer cities or host cities. That's the nature of these conduit revenue bonds. They're, just like the name, the issuer stands as the conduit. It is the entity through which tax exemption is provided, but there isn't, there isn't any risk for the city. And same for in the host city too. The host city is required to provide consent because that's required under state law and federal tax law.
Thank you.
And I guess to kind of answer your other question, Rick, about other agreements and whatnot, I know we kind of briefly discussed TIF. So I did talk to Scott Riggs about that. And TIF is an entirely separate process in this one. And so Praha, or whoever what the formal name of the company is who we agreed to the TIF with. And so even if this sold, we would in theory still continue to pay Praha the TIF unless they basically relinquish the TIF to us to allow us to reassign it to somebody else. But that TIF process is a totally separate process, and he said we're not actually he doesn't believe we're at the point yet in this whole sale process to where we'd even really be ready to reassign any sort of TIF agreement. And so That agreement doesn't go away. It is live and well, and it is with the current property holder and will stay with them unless they relinquish it. He said it's pretty common in deals such as this that part of the transaction for the property includes relinquishing the TIF to allow the city to reassign it. But to this point, we haven't gotten to that point yet.
I'm confused by that, because I thought the TIF, and maybe there was no quid pro quo with the low income. I thought there was a certain amount of units, 20 units or something, they had to be, I can't recall if it was lower rental rates, or I thought there was something we were providing an incentive to or towards, and I thought the TIF was the carrot to provide that. Does that come out in your discussion with anyone, or?
I mean, yeah, so that, I guess that didn't come out in my discussion with Scott, kind of about the TIF. He said when he read through it, he could, from what he saw, the TIF would continue to stay with the current owner of Praha, unless they allow it to basically be reassigned.
Okay, so the TIF has already been created, it's done, and whatever their obligation was, they fulfilled it, and so we just pay it regardless.
Correct.
If they choose to negotiate the sale of it to the new buyer, that's up to them.
Yeah, so if they choose to negotiate it, they would relinquish it back to us, and then we would pass a formal resolution to reassign that to somebody else.
Okay. I'm a little confused about that, because I thought, maybe not the TIF part, I kind of get that, but I kind of was wondering about the requirement. Does anyone else remember, wasn't there a requirement for 20 units or something?
19
units.
Oh, 20%.
And what, was it an income or lower, was it income based, or is,
Yeah, they had to, those 20% of the units had to be rented to, and I forget the exact verbiage, but for LeSueur County, low to moderate income, I believe.
so does that requirement go away then, or
No.
is that,
Nope.
that stays with the property?
That's part of the TIF agreement that we have currently that Josh was mentioning. So if that is then transferred to the new owner, if they ask us to do that, then that will obviously
Oh,
continue.
so that is part of the TIF agreement?
It is part of the TIF agreement, that 20%, correct.
So how do we hold the feet to the fire for the new buyer if they're not part of the agreement?
I think that's what the transfer would do, is they would then transfer that into their name and they would have all the responsibility to meet
Does our
that.
attorney have any input in this, or?
So I suppose,
Yeah, so,
Go ahead, Sophia.
excuse me. So, any of those sort of, income restrictions become, record with respect to the land and the project. And so they are, presumably, I'm not very familiar with the TIF assistance at issue, but this is sort of a common source of funding for these types of projects. And so to the extent there were affordable, housing restrictions on the existing facility to be purchased, those remain with the land, despite there's those wouldn't go away. They would stay with the land and the project for a certain number of years, whatever is in the existing documents, and they would be carried on despite a change in owner.
But wouldn't the agreement have to be assigned to that new owner for the obligations to carry on?
Yes.
Yes.
Although, I'd have to look at the agreements, but, for example, in affordable housing bond issues, we prepare a regulatory agreement, and that stays with the land and stays, in place until usually 15 years. It can stay in place longer, but there are things in place to keep facilities affordable.
Right.
If it is a declaration that was meant to stay in place. But to answer your more specific question, there are going to be, to the extent that's transferred to a different owner, there would be, some instruments to be executed that would, assign, those sort of obligations to the next owner.
Right, yeah, because there's usually an assignment agreement and an acceptance of that agreement for the new owners to then be a party to that agreement and be responsible for the obligations under that agreement. So if,
Yep.
yeah, so the TIF agreement presumably has parties named, and so that would have to be,
Yeah, so I guess the way I interpreted that was that to pay the TIF, the requirement still has to be in place. But assuming the requirement's in place, unless the TIF is transferred, we then would still pay Praha Village for, Cassia keeping the agreement in place. And so for Cassia to get paid to keep it in place, it would have to be transferred. So the feet to the fire thing does feel a little iffy unless the whole transfer of the TIF is made.
Yeah, and that's the only thing that's confusing to me is if the city of New Prague is a party to the TIF agreement, it's not been discussed with this process at all. And since we're talking about the requirement for the units, it's a legitimate interest of the city
Yes.
to make sure that gets complied with. So I would think that we
yeah,
have to be involved in it
Yeah, and so
somehow.
that's where Scott said, in terms of any sort of TIF transfers or that sort of thing, he didn't think we were to that point in the process yet. Like that discussion would come down the road in this whole purchasing process is kind of how he's described it to me.
Okay, so then in the meantime, then our ability to enforce it really is still through Praha Village or the
Yeah, so
system.
it's with the current owner, Praha still owns it, and that's who we'd still enforce it to.
And because it hasn't been sold yet.
Right.
Correct.
You think that would be pretty well talked about by
Well,
now,
yeah.
but you know.
No, I agree.
guess Everyone's,
yeah, in any acquisition, there's,
yeah.
you know,
That wasn't the city's request, though, that for us to order, or to allow the TIF, that's a federal, requirement, that 20% of the housing,
Yes, and so
low.
generally TIF requirement,
That wasn't the city of New Prague saying that we had to do that.
correct.
Federal government was telling
Yeah,
us,
so
yes,
it's
okay.
either the state or the
State,
federal
or
government, I
state.
think it's the state, yeah, sits down kind of your baseline of, to be TIF eligible, you have to meet at least this. Now, cities do have the ability to go above and beyond if they want, but, usually they kind of just hit those minimums and that sort of thing. So yeah, that came down from the state.
All right, so then, what do you need here? Just the, approval then?
So there is a resolution 22060601
That, well,
that basically gives approval to be the host city for this process, as well as approves a joint powers agreement with the city of Rosemont, to kind of be that.
Has Rosemount signed theirs already?
That I'm not, have they?
They have? Okay.
do we need to come out of public
Yes,
hearing?
so we would need to come out of a public hearing
yeah,
first, but
okay.
yeah, that can just be closed by simple by the mayor.
Yep. Okay. Are there any questions then on that? Any further questions that need to be addressed with the public hearing? Otherwise, I take a motion to, close the public hearing.
Second.
And there's a motion and seconded, by Rick and Bruce. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. And then I would take a motion to open the regular city council meeting again.
Second?
A, motion by Rick, seconded by Maggie to open are there any other, discussions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thanks, Sophia.
Thanks, Sophia.
Sure.
But-
Thank you.
But
I'll log off now.
Yes, thank you.
Robin passed
Okay,
out an
bye-bye.
updated one. Is that actually the one?
That
This is for the bond,
20
so the
22
01 is
bond.
just for the joint powers agreement.
Correct.
Okay. All right,
I make a motion to approve the resolution 22-06-06-01.
I'll second.
okay, motion's been made by Bruce, seconded by Maggie. Any, other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, now there's a.
Good luck.
There's a second one in front of you for the sale of the bond, or is that part of it?
The joint powers agreement?
Or that was it?
Yeah, so the joint powers agreement was just, it was kind of a part of the resolution already, but the number 2 on there was just describing that there was a second thing we were talking about.
Okay, all
So
right.
we are
Thank
on
you.
to, we are on to number
Good
10.
luck. Thanks.
Yep.
I'm confused as heck with this.
All right, you're up. Here comes the bonds.
All right, so now the next item is number 10, awarding the sale of general obligation bonds in the principal amount of fixing their form and specifications. So this is for the Columbus Avenue, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the bids were just received around 10 a.m. this morning. So that's why there was some blanks there and a draft resolution originally included with the packet.
Okay,
So we have Doug Green, municipal advisor with Baker Tilly here tonight to talk through the process and our bond rating.
okay. Mr. Green.
All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's very good to be here. Let's see, do I need to hit anything for it to show up?
Just
There we go. There's a lot of bond discussion tonight, and this is just completely coincidental.
Yes.
To put that into context, I think you all have had your fill of conduit bonds for the last 2 meetings. But to put it in a little bit of context, the tax exempt municipal bond world, there's two different parallel worlds. The one we live in, the one we're dealing with here, is the governmental bonds, and then that whole separate private activity where the federal government, IRS, Congress, administration, the IRS has set up all these other uses for tax exempt bonds, and that's what you were dealing with before. The only common denominator is that they're the interest earnings on them at the federal level, at least, is tax exempt. So now we're into the more normal, understandable, less arcane governmental tax exempt bonds. So as Robin mentioned this morning, we took bids on behalf of the city. It's a tough interest rate environment, as you know, but we did have a very good sale. So we went out to bid for $1,215,000 at these maturities, beginning with 2024 maturity going out to 2033. And again, it was for Columbus Avenue project and for a small equipment certificate for the golf course. And so we go out to bid with these separate maturities, and we received three very competitive bids. Robert W. Baird was the winning bid with a true interest cost, that TIC, of 2.6%. You see there's quite a bit of spread there, much larger than normal. Oftentimes you'll see 0.01, 0.023, 0.05% difference all the way up and down the list. And I think this is just reflective of, you see the interest rates at the treasury level and at the corporate bond level, they're just fluctuating so much, so people have a harder time figuring out just exactly where the market is. But this is exactly why we do competitive bids, because we certainly had some differentials there. So when we go out to bid, a lot like your construction bids, where you provide them some flexibility in the way they bid it, because we have to meet their needs, they have to meet our needs. We do the same thing in the bond world. They have different investors, whether they be individuals, whether it be bond funds or insurance company or just whatever, that want different types of bonds that are priced differently. So we give them the flexibility in our bidding parameters, but we ensure that we raise enough capital to meet our funding needs as well. And so what happens in this rising interest rate environment is you get these premium bonds, and you can see that here, where in exchange for they pay higher than 100% for each of those maturities, or most of the maturities, all in all, more than 100% in exchange for higher coupons. And in the bidding parameters, this happens on 99.5% of the bond issues. We say, if you do a premium, we will negotiate with you we don't need to raise that much money, so we'll lower the par amount of the bonds. So we'll take your purchase price plus your premium, and that's what we need to fund our projects. If they were to bid it at par at 100%, where those coupons and the yields were the same, we would raise the same amount of capital, and all in all, over the life of the bonds, we'd pay this, roughly the same amount of debt service. So, again, a lot of bond discussions for you all to open this meeting. So the part, we went out to bid for 1,250,000, but we're actually only selling and improving 1,095,000, because you see here in this table at the bottom, we're taking that premium. At closing, they'll bring $110,000, $111,000 to closing, and we less what we paid them, the underwriters, Baird, to underwrite these bonds. And that's the amount, 1,195,000, essentially. That's what will go into the construction fund to fund our projects. So what does that look like for annual debt service payments? Remember, I'll just jump to this next page first. Maybe this should have been first. There was two purposes here and a number of different funding sources. For the Columbus Avenue projects, because these were small, we amortized them over 10 years. The assessments are kept at 15 years because that's the city's policy. And the equipment we're paying off in 5 years. And you see the average annual debt service for each one of those pieces. Then going back up to what does just the annual debt service payment look like in those first 5 years, the reason why they're bigger is because, again, those equipment portion is in there. The purchasers could frankly care less what we're financing. They just want the general obligation of the city and the city's AA credit rating. They, other than that, they're not concerned. So we lumped them together for efficiency purposes, and that's why you have that strange looking principal structure there.
Why does it take such a drop, maybe, 5 years from the interest and principal on the next, or the page that you just had up?
Right here?
Yeah, 120, 125, 120, 130.
Right, because we structure, when I say structure, it's, what's unique about bonds is, again, each one of these maturities is sold separately, right?
Okay.
Or even a portion of these are sold separately. And so we take the equipment and we just amortize that over 5 years.
Okay.
With level debt service, equal annual payments of principal and interest. We took, we have the Columbus Avenue portion, and you have your assessment policy, which is 15 years, but it's also level principal, which means declining payments. So in order to get that equal annual levy, you structure those principal payments such that you take that minus your assessments and you get an even annual levy. So you combine all that together, that's what we call structuring the bonds.
Okay.
And I guess you see that drop off there because that's when the golf certificate's paid off. And
That's
so
right.
That 50,000
At
comes off the
28,
books,
and
so
then
it drops 50,000.
and then from 29 to 32, we're just paying on the Columbus Avenue.
Okay.
And then up here is, Columbus Avenue's up here too, as well as the equipment.
Okay.
I had a question maybe for Josh, because we talked about wrapping around the golf course payments. Were the payments declining after year 2023? Is that why it's
Correct, yeah. So I think in 23, the payment is like 20 something thousand. And then in 24, it dropped down to less than 20,000. And so that's where.
Oh, so we didn't need to do wraparound? because
We didn't
it
really
all
need to
fell
wrap
off in the
anything. It
first 2
actually
years.
naturally worked
It just
itself
naturally
out.
worked, right.
Okay, great.
So talking about the interest rate environment, this graph is the MMD, it's municipal market data. It's just one of the main indices we use, kind of like the Dow Jones is the main indice that, the stock market uses. The MMD is the main indice we use to see where interest rates generally in the municipal market. So these are GO, it's AAA, very close to what we are, AA. So in the years to maturity, of course, we only care about 10 years and in, but 1 year maturity out to 30-year maturity in the interest rate. The teal line, that is where rates were last year. Go all the way to the top. The reddish oranges are where rates were a month ago. And luckily for our sale, we got a little bit of a reprieve 2 weeks ago, right before Memorial Day. We had a significant drop there, and then it held steady for the last week into this morning. So Certainly in a higher interest rate environment, but, you know, quite frankly, at $1 million, this doesn't make a whole lot of difference, you know, in our interest costs. It certainly helps or hurts a little bit, but it doesn't move the needle too much. So with every bond issuance and I apologize, that says AA plus. That means, that's just foreshadowing where we're going. Yeah, sorry about that. So with each bond issuance, the market does require an updated credit rating. It is AA, not AA plus. I mean, the differences would be like 0.05, 0.07%. So it's nominal. More bragging rights than anything else. And these are the main areas that they look at. Your economy is, you know, very good. You part of the larger Minneapolis-St. Paul economy. Your wealth averages are higher than national averages. Within management, you have all the policies in place. You know, year after year, you have, you know, small surpluses that allows you to keep up with your fund balance policy. Again, that's with the budget performance. That's year over year, looking to make sure there's not, you know, big, you know, massive surplus or massive deficit. You're just good at annual budgeting. Budget flexibility is both your fund balances and your cash position. In your enterprise funds, along with liquidity, they're all related. Very strong, you know, cash positions and governmental funds and enterprise funds overall. And in debt, just like all Minnesota cities, it's high compared to national average, and that's simply because we have the statutory authority to borrow, with, you know, relatively easily, and so that's the case all over. I think this is the most important measure with debt service. Debt service is a percent of expenditures. That just shows how much debt service is crowding out your operations. Right? If it gets too high, then you don't have enough to pay your operations, and it's at 16%, and generally it depends on, you know, the budget and the local economy and everything else, but 15 to 20 is you know, where most folks are, you know, or above 20. Even if we got above 20, I wouldn't be concerned about our credit rating, but so, you know, it's right there. Where a lot of what we call the carrying charges, debt service is a percentage of expenditures. So all in all, the tougher interest rate environment than, you know, years past, but still very good results. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Green?
We've been there. So,
Otherwise, I would take a motion to approve the,
Resolution 22060602.
yeah.
so moved.
It's been a motion by Maggie, is seconded by Sean. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Doug.
sir.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda. Recommend hiring of Michael Barth as a new Prague firefighter. Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Hi. All right, as you see in front of you, we have a retirement happening tomorrow, and we are recommending the hiring of Michael Barth. He has a background in dispatch, reserve deputy, he was a paramedic, and a volunteer and a full-time fire department member for a few years. He is currently working in the steel industry in Montgomery, so he has some availability for daytime calls also. So we're just looking for the okay to hire Mr. Barth.
I'll make a motion that we hire Michael Barth as the new firefighter.
Motion by Sean, seconded by Rick. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the recommendation of a facility study firm.
Yes, so facilities committee, which has been put together, kind of various employees throughout the city kind of sat on this committee. We sifted through what were 11 firms that ultimately gave us proposals, narrowed those proposals down to 3, which are the top 3 on the list there in your packet. Interviewed the 3 firms and then compared some examples that those firms had done with other communities. And ultimately, after all of that, we all kind of collectively agreed that Wold Architects for $13,000 was the way we believe the city should move forward. Ultimately, they came in not only at the lowest bid, but they proposed about a 12-week project, which was not the shortest, but it was also not the longest. There was someone that came in very short and some that came in very, very long. And after interviewing them, we all felt comfortable that Wold could do the best job for the city.
Okay, any questions for Josh on this?
Just how do you see this firm incorporating the city council into the process?
So that was kind of something that we looked into each of them. And when asked, they all said they'd be willing to meet with the city council if they saw that. But all of them wanted a kind of extensive work with staff. And so that was something I was going to ask of them, that we have at least one session where they sit and can actually meet with you guys as well to hear what your thoughts are and needs, and incorporate you all in the process as well before just the final, as you see with a lot of stuff that ends up getting done. So,
Did you see this program getting off the ground in the summer months, or is this something staff wouldn't be as available until later in the summer? Or
so I foresee this kind of getting off the ground as soon as we're ready to go. I know, assuming you're accept our recommendation to go with Wold, I'll get a hold of them because they do want to basically set up a contract with us, and so hopefully we can have that back at the next city council meeting and we can get running with this in July. The hope would be have it wrapped up before the end of the year.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'd take a motion to accept the RFP and instruct the city administrator to enter into a contract with Wold.
So moved.
I'll second.
There's been a motion by Sean, seconded by Maggie. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay. Okay, the next item is the IT consulting service agreement revised.
Yes, so at our last meeting, you all had a few questions about the agreement in place. So I did sit down with CTS and go over their agreement. So what we were looking at a lot of was their hourly rate agreement. And that is kind of their standard template that they work out with all cities. And then there's a second part to the agreement that mentioned the bulk price of $10,426 a month. That is kind of our general services agreement. So the way he described it is 99.9% of the stuff that we would do as a city would fall under that flat rate of $10,000 a month. He said the stuff that would fall outside of that would be if someone was working on a Saturday and had computer problems and really needed to get some work done and needed it fixed then, we'd fall under the hourly rate. He said if for some reason we were building a new wing to City Hall and needed them to pull cable and we didn't work it out with them ahead of schedule like we would normally do anyway, then we'd also fall under the hourly rate. But he said even for those big projects, normally cities call and they basically set up a work agreement beforehand and it wouldn't hit that hourly rate. So all that being said, he did understand where the 60-day and 30-day on the hourly contract could be a little fuzzy or whatnot. So he did actually cross out and sign next to it that to switch up, so it's 60-day, 60-day in terms of that hourly rate. But for the bulk monthly price, that one is a 12-month contract that then goes month to month until either party proposes a change or opts out.
Okay. Does that answer everybody's question from
Kind of,
last?
I mean, in today's day and age, I mean, it just seems so expensive that
It is one of those things that jump off off the table as, but I mean, technology's become so
gotta have
ingrained.
it.
I mean, at this point, Kent is fighting Microsoft on getting our new planner and email address. And I mean, it's something completely out of our hands or CTS's hands, and we're just waiting on Microsoft at this
All
point.
right, I understand that
So-
security risk and, hey, these computers, they just.
Okay, does somebody wanna, I'll make a motion to accept the agreement for consulting services for, is it, computer technology
Computer
solutions?
technology solutions.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, the next item is City Hall remodel.
Yes, this item we briefly discussed last time. If you remember right, I brought before you a $10,000 and a $20,000 option. From what we'd been told, kind of the difference between them was the $20,000 option just required more labor because you had to cut through an existing wall. Matt got to thinking about it and talking with some of our in-house staff who have done construction in the past, and figures that if we're willing to wait a few weeks for the project to get done while other tasks are being done around the city, we could basically eliminate the cost of labor on that front. And it would, I kind of laid out the estimated construction costs in the memo that then come out to be $5,700 or $5,750 compared to the previous 20, and then there would be money then put into office furniture, I guess, basically desks and chairs and whatnot for the new offices. So I would say hats off to Matt for realizing what we have in-house and hiring people who used to be in the construction trade that could do the work for us.
I agree, Matt. Nice job. How did it go over with your brother, though, considering he was gonna get the bid that you just took away from him?
He was not gonna get the bid. I asked for an extremely high dollar amount. Once we got to that point, we had been reaching out to a lot of people for bids, but.
Okay.
No, internally, our staff, we have a very wide variety of people that can do a lot of different things from construction to HVAC, so we're very fortunate when it comes to that.
No, that's great. Way to think outside the box.
And so I guess I would just be looking for approval for us to be able to advance on that and make that space for staff.
Looking for motion then for that.
And you're suggesting, or you give her some options, but I guess my druthers would be just, your first recommendation was take it out of the general fund?
Yes, and so my first recommendation is to take it out of the general fund. I did lay out a few options, anywhere from using ARPA funds or funds that we'd set aside for a city hall replacement or city hall repair. Ultimately, as we have done very well, almost year after year at acquiring a surplus, using some of that surplus instead of dipping into other avenues where we have money saved away for something else.
I would concur and recommend approval of that, the recommendation as it's presented with that money coming from that source.
I'll second.
There's been a motion by Bruce, seconded by Maggie. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
So you can't just move the desk upstairs, or?
Well, I mean, we could, but then they would need a desk downstairs.
So
yeah.
somebody's gonna utilize.
Yeah, so
it.
if you take the office that I am currently in, we're gonna put a half cubicle wall, and it's big enough that we could actually make two small offices in there.
Okay.
And so we're basically creating 3 extra offices out of this whole process.
Item E, EDA street extension in industrial park.
Yes, a few meetings ago, I kind of filled you all in that the EDA was considering extending both 6th Avenue Northwest and 8th Avenue Northwest, kind of depending on where the cost estimates lined up and that sort of thing. Estimates did come back from SEH to the EDA, kind of on 2 different potential avenues, and I see already that anytime you type SEH into Microsoft Word, it corrects you to she, and so you then have to go back and fix it, and I already see that I missed one. So the 2 different options are starting the work this year and doing any underground work and then kind of road base work in the fall and then paving in the spring. And the other option would be to start the whole process in the spring. Initially, we thought, speaking with Chris Cavett and SEH, that the starting in the fall might actually be a good option because many times Your underground crews and your road-based crews do work in spring, early summer to prepare for asphalt work in late summer, fall. So the underground crews tend to have less going on at the end of the year because all their work is usually bulked at the beginning. And asphalt crews on the other side, all their work is late in the season, so they're more freed up early in the year. And we thought that we could obtain a little bit of savings in doing that. He does still think we could get some savings, just how work is going right now. He doesn't know how big those actual savings would look. He said there would still be savings in just engineering costs and that sort of thing. Ultimately, he thought that we'd save about $100,000 if we were to split the work, then do all of it in 2023. And so I shared this with the EDA and kind of looking at the costs, knowing that stuff doesn't seem to be getting any cheaper. I noticed over the last couple of years, the estimate on this has gone up 20–30%. The EDA thought that they would like to move forward, obviously with City Council's blessing. This is something that would run the EDA a little bit short. Currently, we have about $400,000 in the just general EDA fund and $150,000 in the EDA Industrial Park Fund. And so we'd look at using some of that, and then the Industrial Park Fund would basically run short or in the negative until they're able to sell a couple more lots that would put them back in the positive. And so with that, I guess we are recommending proceeding with the build out of those before they, I guess, continue to go up in price and become more expensive each year.
Okay, any questions, other questions on that? Okay, hearing none,
Well, does the EDA have any concerns about draining all their funds like that? I mean, they're gonna be rock bottom.
They didn't seem to have much concern on that. I know at this point, I mean, the EDA doesn't have any plans, as far as I'm aware of, for projects that they would like to do in the immediate future with those funds. I mean, especially the industrial park funds are there for that reason. And so I guess at the meeting, there were no concerns expressed by that.
Yeah, my perspective is probably that there's certainly concerns about it, but we're faced with the situation that this has to be done.
mm-hmm.
It's not really a question of if or
Yeah.
it's just when. And unfortunately, with the times that we're in and the inflation that's occurred, it's ran away from us, and the lots haven't sold as quickly as originally planned, probably. So this is the circumstances that we have. So it's not going to get any better, as Josh says, and we should just follow through with it.
Drop the hammer.
The city itself has economic funds in one of our funds, I think. I can't recall how much it is, but it's a material number. If something came up, I'm sure we could go into that fund number, whatever that is, and look at that for a specific purpose or initiative or some particular incentive that we would need to come up with. That would be something that we would want the city to consider from an EDA's perspective.
And maybe it would help some of the lot sales too, because I know
Doing
that
this
is a
would create
question.
4 corner lots.
Yeah.
That aren't currently corner lots.
I think it would be a plus to that, because of, I mean, you say, well, there's a street that's proposed here, but we don't know when it's gonna be in, and if somebody's looking at it but would need that street access, or would want it,
It's been a common question as well, if I buy a lot and I don't have the street there, when will that be available?
yeah.
And not being able to answer that has been difficult. I don't know that we've missed a sale because of it at this
No.
point, but
It could.
we definitely could.
And the money that's getting drained like that, really, still gonna be middle of next summer before that even is drained, correct? I mean. you got
Correct. So
150
it's possible we could sell a lot between now and then.
Yeah.
Why is there not any assessments to the owners of that, well, at least the one lot that borders that street?
So
I mean, if we did it here in town, the homeowners or the businesses would get it.
correct. So I would say,
The city is the developer.
I would say that the city is the developer at this point, since we are the one that owned all the lots and are selling them. And generally, if a developer came to us and wanted to build 10 industrial lots, we would require them to put these streets in before they were allowed to sell any lots. And so we gave ourselves a little break. But yeah, generally all this work would be done before the single lot is sold.
Okay, so what do you need here? Just the motion to go ahead and go out for RFPs?
I would
or-
say just the approval to move forward, and I'll talk to SEH, and you'll ultimately see us come back with bids and plans and that sort of thing, but this is just to get the ball rolling with SEH to move us forward.
Okay,
So moved.
so Rick made the motion to approve forward, or move forward with the 6th and 8th Avenue Northwest Project CDA extension. Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion by Rick, seconded by Bruce. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda is the CARES Act and ARPA funding update.
So I'll speak to that. At our last meeting, use of CARES and ARPA funds came up, so Josh and I thought we would give you an update on where everything is at with that. So CARES and ARPA, two separate funding sources related to COVID. CARES was received in spring of 2020 and was allowable through the fall of 2020. So we were allocated $606,941. So the city was able to utilize all of those funds. Below was the list of what was anticipated and how those funds were utilized. So there was a couple projects that were chosen to not be completed that I just did a strikeout. I made a note in italics that it wasn't completed. And then there was another one that ended up being paid for by parks instead of CARES funds.
Okay.
And then on page 2 is just a summary of ARPA, so American Rescue Plan Act. We will receive a total of $902,999.08. So we've received the first half in fiscal year 21, and then the second half will be received in 2022. So below is the list in December of 21 that was presented to council for proposed use of the ARPA funds. So to date, in fiscal year 22 here, we recently had the server upgrades that we paid for just over $36,000 utilizing those funds. We have until December 31st of 2024 to allocate those funds, so.
Okay.
I'm not sure that you can answer this, Robin, but the items that were crossed out under CARES, were the monies allotted for those purposes not spent or went somewhere else, or did the other areas absorb those funds?
Yeah, so there were some costs that came in higher and lower, of course. Overall, though, the funds were utilized. It was used on wages for public safety for
So
the
it was
police.
used in these areas then?
Yes.
That were done?
Yep,
So there's no, okay.
there's no lost funds.
Yeah, I'll say, yeah.
My second comment is just on the ARPA and this list. My understanding that was brought to council, this was a list that we may or may not use, is really meant to be a placeholder, not
Correct.
meant to be necessarily a guideline.
Correct, yeah,
That is
and
part of
it's still kind of a placeholder. As a plan, it's completely manipulable. If you notice, even on the fourth one there, City Hall renovations to increase space, with tonight's approval, we can cross that out. And it may be fully possible that we come across something really big in 2023 and we decide to move all the funds that way. At this point, this is kind of the placeholder that we submitted to the federal government when they asked. And so, like any plan, it can be changed. I would guess during our budget discussions this year, we'll probably dig back into this and see how we might want to change or manipulate from what we currently have.
I believe it's been accepted by everybody, pretty much. You have it on the list of strategic things to work on.
Yes.
And I'm all for working on that as soon as possible to give a better guideline of what we're gonna use the money for this year.
Correct.
So we don't.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, any other questions on this? Otherwise, we'll move on to item 8G.
All right, so a quick update on the rental dwelling inspection ordinance. So back on December 20th of 2021, I provided an update where we had been with our discussions on the rental dwelling inspection ordinance. Really, that discussion at that meeting ended where City Council wanted a follow-up following the first of the year in 2022, and then setting up a meeting with the task force committee, which had not been appointed yet. We obviously, within a few weeks after that, had our resignation of Chad Lunder, a building official, who was very heavily involved in working on drafts of this ordinance, and obviously through the inspection process that would work hand in hand with that ordinance. So we had to kind of put that on hold while we were hiring our building official, and then obviously I had our hiring process for the planner, which is occupying quite a bit of my time. But anyway, getting back to that, we're obviously halfway through the year here. We believe we've got the ability to get back into discussions with this. Again, in looking back at where we left everything, I took a look at, and I put the memo in here, actually, that was brought to the council right before we shut down for COVID. But we had a list of names for landlord, tenant, and at-large interested parties. So I would plan with your concurrence to reach back out to these individuals that had volunteered to serve on that task force, see if we can find out if they're still interested, and then bring that back on June 20th for having that task force appointed formally and move forward with meeting with them and continuing on with the process.
And are we gonna go in there with the packet, the last packet that I showed you? Are we gonna go in there with that in mind? Because that one excluded law enforcement, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so the ordinance that was in the packet here did not have the crime-free housing component. That was obviously the thing we had discussed back at that time.
Well, we were waiting to see what the attorneys worked out in.
In Faribault at the time, yep.
So it would
Yeah,
be
I don't
nice-
know at this
It'd be
point
nice
if-
to find out what the results of that was, because I'd like to see that law enforcement.
Yeah, and we'd have, city attorney would be part of our task force, and we would go over those details with the task force, how that turned out, you know, moving forward, how either Faribault and or other cities that have been involved in litigation, you know, to date, and how that should help our path forward, as it comes back to
Scott
council.
in here and we'll find out, because, I
Yeah.
don't wanna get the city involved in a lawsuit, but that was kind of an important component to the, in general idea of the whole thing, I mean.
Yep.
So, to remove it would be.
Now, this would cover, and just got a question, this would cover residential and commercial.
Just residential dwellings. This would not cover
Anything on Main Street, it
This would
wouldn't
not cover any commercial rental property, only if it's used as a dwelling unit. So it could, obviously, it will apply to residential units above commercial units downtown, or if they're not even necessarily above them downtown, but any residential commercial unit.
And why is that?
Why is that the case? Are you, I honestly have not heard of a residential or a commercial rental inspection ordinance at this point.
Okay.
But
I
simply,
mean-
that's where we had
Yeah.
not gone that road.
Yeah, but, you know, we had a lot of crap floating around and it
Yep.
dealt with the commercial.
That's a good question.
And-
I can bring
And,
that up.
You know, so if we're gonna do, to me, it's, if we're gonna do it, let's do it. Otherwise, forget it.
I agree.
Yeah, I do too.
So, the other part of where he, and Sean, you might remember this going back, boy, even, I think right after you got on the council, we had talked about a property maintenance code.
Oh, yeah.
That could be an added component that I think would get to the issues that you're bringing up, about property maintenance and conditions of building that might not otherwise be caught.
I'm just thinking about all the crap that went around with that one,
Yep.
with the one on Main Street and the city got thrown under the bus because we're not doing anything. Well, there's nothing that we could do, but, you know, to me, if we're gonna, if we're gonna mandate this, it's everybody or nobody. Because as you know, I'm not a big proponent of this, so.
Nope, good question. That'll be
So-
brought up, definitely.
Because, you know, and if we're gonna try and help the landlords, you know, with crime-free housing or crime-free, you know, I mean, commercial is just as well open to being able to have those background checks done on their tenants, so we don't end up with criminals selling stuff on our main street too.
Yeah, we can definitely bring that up.
Well, without getting into specifics of individual property owners, what are the issues you're kind of talking about?
Well-
Or I guess I didn't, this is the first time I really talked
Yeah,
about commercial property involved.
Yeah, so back in the day, and see, to me, commercial property also would be Mill Pond.
Oh, that's residential though.
That's residential.
Well, is it, or is it commercial? I mean,
No, people, it qualifies as a resident.
Definitely residential at that point. Now, there are some exceptions for HUD properties that would exempt them from the way this is written, and obviously HUD federal law, so we'll get into those details as
But
well.
you're talking about anything that people don't live in or
so,
sleep in.
yeah, so basically it it could have happened in a residential. The landlord was playing games with the tenant, shutting off power and all that stuff, where, you know, it is illegal. And to me, there's remedies under the state that nobody took action on, but, if that would have been in a residential and we would have had the residential ordinance, the city would have been in there and saying, you can't do that. Well, in this case, being it would be commercial, the city would be powerless, and it'd be kind of the same thing, minus they couldn't conduct business in there because the heat or the electricity got shut off. So it's just the same thing, you know, just that they're not living there.
Right.
I'm not sure the property inspection ordinance you're referring to would cover that situation.
Yeah, and that's why I think there's a property, international property maintenance code that might address some of those issues, again, for just general occupancy, not necessarily residential occupancy. We'll look into that. I know that was something we had probably 10 years ago had looked at on a real high level, so we can.
So I want to be careful with that, so we don't, you know, to me, or all of a sudden, if an apartment happens to exist in the back of that business that we don't know about, and then.
Well, I think there's also could be, public health issues, so,
Yeah, there you go.
there was.
Public health issue
Yeah,
there
so,
maybe
yeah.
too.
There was an individual that was renting a property on Main Street that told me that there were bats that were getting into the property.
Yeah.
So that's not a good thing.
So there were issues, a couple of them, not a lot, but probably not as many as the residential, but.
But
Yeah,
that
we've-
could be
we've
brought
heard of
up
two.
on a separate resolution of its own.
It may very well be a different ordinance, but we'll.
But I
look into
think
that.
it needs to be looked at, because some of these people, if we're gonna ask these landlords, they own both. So,
Make it happen, Josh.
so what do you need?
Yes, sir.
Are you just
looking
gonna,
for direction for staff to reach back out to the applicants on the task force, see if they're still interested, and then ultimately plan to bring back a final recommendation and list on the 20th of June to get that task force going.
Can we get an update on the bug house over here? I mean, what's the latest with that?
it's up for sale.
Yeah, everything got completed, and it's up for sale,
To your satisfaction or?
and the
city's?
county.
And the county, okay.
And he did get a building permit to do the
And you got a building
remodeling
permit to do some remodeling in there. and
Good, okay.
It looks
there. Still looks like crap, but
all right. The public health and safety issues are gone,
Okay.
but it is completed.
to put it bluntly, but,
You've got an ugly house.
well, you know, and that's,
I don't know if it's sold yet. I went up
No,
on
it
the market
isn't.
about 2 weeks ago. I think.
yeah, and it hasn't. Yes, you're right. I've been watching it.
We should move forward before you step in a cop eye.
I hear you. Okay. Next, so is it okay if he does that? Is that the consensus of the council
Yes.
for him? Okay.
Good.
Anything else that needs to be brought up? We have a couple things in front of us from the police chief. Yes, we are. We have been in miscellaneous. Oh, no, wow. I'm sorry. Now we are.
Matt, you're first.
Just a little update on the city rental house just north of City Hall here. About a month ago, the fire department got a call, carbon monoxide alarm was going off. It was determined that there is a smell of gas coming from the boiler. So the fire department turned the valve off, am I correct in saying that? And aired it out to make it safe. The next day we went in there and had a local plumber come in and determine that there's a cracked heat exchanger on the boiler. Problem is that boiler's over 50 years old and you cannot get parts for it.
Yep.
He actually walked in and said, I've done this for so long, I've never seen a boiler like this before. So I went in getting some prices on replacing it. The first price I got was $6,000 to $8,000 to replace it. Again, we just hired someone that's in the HVAC world, so that's gonna help out a lot. So I got a price for about $2,500 to buy a brand new boiler, and we would install it internally. So that's where we're at kinda right now is, it has no heat, there is no heat in there, until we replace that boiler.
Okay,
Is that, well, I've been on record, I've had a problem with us owning that house just because it's not at market rate. And there are people that are upset that feel like the city's subsidizing the renters. And I've heard that from many people over the last 10 years, but, now the boiler, this at city expense needs to be fixed. And that'll put us negative, I'm sure, in where we were just breaking even, I think, with the rate that was being charged. And I guess my worry is it's the boiler now, what's next? You know, the roof leaks, when are we gonna get out of the housing,
real estate business, yeah.
the real
Exactly
estate
where I
business?
was, Sean, that is exactly what I was thinking.
So,
And there's no way to get rid of the tenant, is that correct?
No,
Well, we have a
No.
month-to-month
Eliminate the whole
lease on the
problem?
place.
it's a lease, yeah.
yeah, we do have a lease.
It is inspected about every 2 to 3 years, Ken, by our building inspector to make sure it's up to code. So, I mean, it is up to code. Is everything old in there? Absolutely.
Yeah,
There's
I
nothing
just
new
don't
in
want to nickel and diming the taxpayers.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that's when.
And that's why
it's-
we're here to update you on where it's at right now.
Yeah. So,
Is the lease a month to month?
That is correct.
Yeah, and I can't remember all the,
Well, we've gone through this several times, I mean,
yeah, but we just did one before Mike got off, remember?
Just last year, I think.
This lease is only about a year old.
Yeah,
What?
actually, it was the first lease that they could find. It was just,
No, it's the first lease that was ever in writing.
Yeah.
Entered into January 1, 2021.
Yep.
and didn't we leave off where they were gonna start slowly bringing it up, you guys were gonna bring it up to market rate?
No.
No,
it's
that
just
was
a
never
set
discussed.
dollar amount.
When we did the research on this, there was no one able to find any documentation of it, but it was agreed that some prior city council, I'm not sure when, agreed to this as part of a purchase of it, of the property. So it's a deal that was struck that we have to live with.
yeah,
And what we did last year is just formalize it in writing, so if there's a problem with meth or some other issue, that we have the legal rights to do things. When it was just a narrative, a verbal agreement, we had a lot of liability, so we charged Mike with trying to get that done, and he got some agreement done. So whatever our agreement is what we have to live with. So if the roof, I think it's until she passes away, or,
I don't know if it's that.
No, it's, well, go ahead, Josh.
But it's
you
in the
read up on it,
agreement.
But it's a month-to-month lease that there's a certain time frame if you wanted her to,
I don't
wanted
think,
her out, you have a time frame. Joshua, is it 2 months?
I'll have to look at that, I don't remember off the top of my head.
I don't think there's an ability for us to say, okay, we're gonna discontinue your lease in 2 months, you're out. I don't think that we have that ability.
well, if it was a
there's something
verbal
that's-
agreement, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but is there minutes for, I mean, did the council approve that, or was it just somebody at City Hall said you can?
No,
do this.
it was.
And if there's nothing in writing that
it was-
they can
There
produce?
probably is minutes from way back, I don't know, but it was part of the estate of Mr. Yelinek.
We keep hearing that, but I asked how many millions of times, it's gotta be in writing, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. It's not like pre-attorney,
So I guess to Bruce's point, I mean, even if it was a narrative at this point, we kind of are under the current lease agreement that we
Yep.
signed. Looking at it, it is a 30-day.
Notice?
It's a 30-day notice by either party to terminate the lease at this point.
Yeah, so.
I'm not looking to kick anybody out
No.
on the street either. But I don't want this to be, there are taxpayers that are very upset at that the city is subsidizing that property for one individual. And, and I've heard it from many people, and now it's gonna start costing the taxpayers money to fix a boiler, and like I said, it's a very old house. Didn't we, a few years ago, we had to redo the decking out front, didn't we, or the porch?
We put a Band-Aid on it, yes.
Yeah,
So to that point, I mean, similar to it being a 30-day notice to terminate the lease, within the rent, I mean, along the same lines, is we would have to give 30-day notice of any sort of increase on rent. Is spelled right out in there, which is really no different than the lease. You're just basically telling them that we're gonna operate under a new lease agreement in 30 days. And so if we decide we wanna raise the rent, we would just have to give a 30-day notice on that.
I'd just prefer that we just sold it and let somebody else rent it out,
Well,
but I don't know why
no,
we're
I
owning the
think-
property.
I think the city should keep the property and tear down the house.
Exactly.
But we need to have a plan before
yes.
we're gonna act on anything.
But yeah, so Matt tonight just wanted to kind of fill you all in that
I
we
appreciate
are
that.
having boiler problems, and were you looking for approval tonight to act on it now, or?
Well, it is something that, yeah, we have a few months, but there is that time where you know, September, you can get some cold weather, where we need a boiler put in there, so I would hate to put a boiler and then you guys tell me.
We violate our own ordinance, rental ordinance.
No,
No, it was more just an informational for you guys to soak on it, I guess, and then maybe we can discuss about it.
I'm really lack the understanding of why we wouldn't do it as soon as possible.
Right away, yeah.
About a rental ordinance, and we're the landlords that are talking about maybe wait, that just doesn't jive. It should be done as soon as we can get it done.
I
It-
agree
it
with you,
is one of
Bruce.
those-
I agree with
Yeah,
that too.
you know, it's just, even now, we can get some cool
Yeah.
days.
especially this summer, you know.
Caveat that if we're gonna put another, what did you say, 2,600?
It's roughly $2,500. Again, that's all work being done in-house. We're doing that all.
If we do that, then, make it so that the lease starts building up, so you get back to market rate. I mean, there's nothing in writing that says that that rental property shouldn't be at market rate. You know, and I appreciate people doing people favors, but they really didn't do it right. It should have been in writing so that we knew what was going on. When we do something, it's there so that everybody can see it. So I don't know what the council did at that time, but
I'm not sure the council was even involved in it.
Well, just to review, last year when we redid this, there was extensive research done at the law office to try to find any documentations about the agreement.
Yep.
The law office could not find it, the city and people here at the city couldn't find it. And there was discussions with certain of the city council members that were there at the time, and this is what they recollected. This was talked about last year by the council that we approved the lease.
Yep.
So we can send the lease around again and look at it, and maybe we should do that to
I can do
people.
that.
If it does have the ability to change the market rent, but
Yeah, I mean,
that,
I
you know,
think
that's
so.
something that can be talked about, but.
I'll make a motion to authorize Matt to, proceed.
Well, I guess first I'd like to mention, the reason I'm bringing it to you, it's been a hot topic, this house. So if we had a furnace go out at the golf course that is gonna be there for the next hopefully 100 years, I would have had it fixed instantly. But this has been a hot topic for years upon years, so I feel like this is something, she doesn't need heat right now. Let's talk about it so you guys are up to date on it, where you don't see a expenditure for $2,500 and go, what is going on here? Why didn't you keep me in the loop? So, again, I would like to make it clear, I would have fixed it instantly if the council says, hey, we're keeping that house open and running at all cost, that's fine, but it has been a very hot topic, that's why I'm bringing it to you.
I think we comply with the terms of the agreement that we have.
And we are.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, that would be fixing it, so.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so do you need a motion for
No,
approval on that?
it was just for information purposes.
Okay,
And I will send the lease around to the council if you guys would like to.
that'd be nice to have again, refresh my brain.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Matt. Jim?
First item is the request to hold fireworks by American Legion Post 45. And it looks like I was batting about 500 on my memo with, it is planned for July 3rd, 2022. A couple 21s are in there yet. But it requires, the permit was provided by the fireworks company. And normally that is signed off by the fire chief and the administrator. We have that submitted along with the certificate of insurance naming the city, and also the school district, because it's on their property. So it would be the same as last year, with no indication that there would be any anticipated road closures at all. For the last few years, we haven't shut down the road at all.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
All right. Any questions? I'll make a motion to, allow the American Legion Post 45 to have their fireworks.
Second.
There's a motion, a second by Rick. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
The second item that I left for you is an application for a liquor license off sale for a brewery. New law that was written into allows a brewery to sell up to 128 ounces of beer for off sale. This law was added to allow small breweries the ability to sell more of their product. This law pertains directly to cans of beer. So they would look at canning their beer, either 4-packs or 6-packs, and allowing customers to take those off premise for consumption. The way they wrote the law, it is a separate off sale than the one that they already hold. So it's just a short application that the city can approve. It would get sent up to the state. They evidently send out an agent to inspect, and then they are able to provide that service. I did talk to Aaron today. He is not canning beer right now, but he has everything, all of the items he needs to put it in production. He was gonna be doing that anyway, then this law came out, so he is looking forward to doing that. But he was gonna be doing it because he's gonna be distributing it to other,
Vendors?
retailers and vendors. So I just brought it up. It did come up, he had a question about it and the process. I was able to talk to the alcohol and gambling today. Like they said, had they asked the AGE, they would have just said, hey, just write the law and incorporate it into off sale for small breweries, and it would have just been done already then. That as soon as the law went in effect, if they had an off sale, it could have included this. But they wrote it out separate, so it is a separate license at this time. And I would anticipate their regular off sale license, the city charged $100 for. I would anticipate that it would be the same charge for this one, $100.
So we don't need another tier in there, or, you know, how we have like a 3-2 license and then just a beer and wine only license and then a hard liquor. There doesn't need to be a,
It is the same as the off sale. And maybe they'll, in the next couple years, they'll incorporate it into the same thing. That's a possibility. Maybe. But we'll see. But, no, I would just anticipate that because having the ability to sell it would just be another $100. They pay $100 for their off sale. This would be $100, and then they actually pay $200 for their Sunday sales.
I'm a little confused by the 128 ounces per day. What is that? I'm not-
It was just the number they chose, that it could be a couple 6-packs or however they can them then. The cans could be 12 ounces, they could be 20-ounce cans, but the limit would be carrying out 128 ounces at one time for one customer.
Oh, okay.
In those cans.
That's one customer.
That's one customer.
Okay. I thought it was,
per day.
Yeah,
I thought it was the brewery that's all they could sell.
No,
Boy, I know, cause how stingy.
you'd have to pick your customer then.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
So I can't do the math that quick. That's not even a 24 pack then.
That is a 12-pack and an 8-ounce can. Or no, it'd be 10 cans.
God, he
Or
could.
10, yeah, 10, 12 ounce.
He's gonna have some odd sales.
So it's up to you. I'm sorry it didn't get on agenda at all, but, if you do authorize it, the liquor license tonight, I would get it, or Barb would get it up to the state and start that process for him.
Then it has to go up to the state. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I am too.
Then somebody,
I'll make a
moved.
motion that we
Okay.
approve the application for the off-sale extension of 128 ounces per day per customer.
Second.
okay, there's a motion by Sean, seconded by Maggie to approve the application. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, anything else, chief?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Robin,
I don't have anything.
Ken?
Quick update on lawn grass and weeds. We have many letters out and many are getting mowed, over the next few days if they aren't. So be watching, but things are getting cleaned up, I think.
Good.
I think they are taking advantage of no mow May, right? Even
Which
though
we
we
did
did
not
not.
officially have. No,
No.
we did not. I heard many people call, it was no mow May, and I explained we do not participate in that.
Right,
So yeah, that's been an interesting topic.
yes.
Thank your neighbor for the mosquitoes, right? Josh?
Yes, a few things. First, there is a mayor stakeholder event on Wednesday morning.
Yep.
At
7:45.
7:45, that they've invited the city council to.
At the depot,
What was that?
at the depot.
Yeah, at the depot. Dwayne has apparently more information than
No, I just have the email here. I mean, I just,
All right, next. So as you all, I'm likely, sure saw in the paper, we did have a security incident where we had a person, we'll say, get himself into our utility building and then decide to borrow one of our fire vehicles. Looking into that, we have kind of been reviewing policy and talking among staff about that. We do currently have city vehicle policy that requires all vehicles to be basically secured and locked when they're unattended. That is something we're also kind of looking into a little bit to see if we need to revise the language on that. Just knowing that especially our police officers during the winter, a lot of times for the security of their equipment, need to leave the vehicles running. So we're gonna talk through that with our attorney to make sure our language allows for them to still leave their vehicles running if they're locked and cannot be accessed, and that sort of thing. So we are looking at that. I'm also currently going through and writing a policy that's just, we don't have one on the books that makes sure and requires that certain doors are locked to the public at all times. It was one of those policies you don't feel like you have to write, but I guess we do. So you'll likely be seeing that here probably in the next month or so after I've vetted it through staff and legal to make sure that it really just outlines which doors are open to the public and when and that sort of thing. So other than that, I know we're continuing to explore other ways to be secure. I know the new utilities line garage building is implementing a key code access, and we're actually having CTS look at a lot of our facilities to see what upgrading to key codes would kind of cost us. And even for you guys, that would allow you guys to have security badges that that way if you get here early before a meeting, you could key yourselves in and that sort of thing. So we're looking into what that might possibly cost us. I guess, do you have any other questions about, I know Patrick very eloquently wrote the article, so I have no beefs with him on that. Did you all have any other questions about that incident or what we may be looking at?
Well,
right
no,
now,
but
or-
the key input pad, for the water towers, it's locked anyway, isn't it? I mean, there was no way for anything to happen. It
So-
just alerted everybody.
Yep, so, from what I've been told by Bruce, he basically got into the building, because we had a couple employees who were welding in that area, and they had the door that's normally locked propped open for fresh air and just the screen door closed. Well, the screen door at that time didn't have a locking mechanism. It does now. And he basically got in and slipped behind them while they were welding, and I guess he pulled a few levers here and there, pushed some buttons, and was found and escorted on his way. And then the system alerted us that, hey, are you sure you want this wide open or this closed? And our guy said no and put everything back. But I know there was certain articles written that basically stated that water towers were going to flood, and it made it sound like half of New Prague was going to need to build a new ark. But those water towers are actually designed to be able to overflow and generally run into a creek or some sort. If you go around the water towers, you'll see drains and dips in and around them to where they're designed to. They have overflow points, and that's at those points that they'd flow into. So even if for some reason we didn't have the computer system in place to catch it, how they're just built and designed would have caught it. So,
Because social media kind of went crazy with it.
Your comments, I didn't understand that he was escorted out, though. I thought he left on his own without anyone knowing.
I guess I'd have to look back into it, I guess.
Because he took the truck, didn't he?
Yeah, so, from what I heard, he was basically escorted back out to that door that he came in, and then the truck was sitting back there, and that's, from what I heard, but I mean, that's, I can look back into that and see exactly how.
What, does our police chief have any understanding of that? Did city staff escort him out of the building?
My understanding is yes, that they talked to him and escorted him outside the premises.
And then he went to the truck?
And then he walked in the area again and went into the truck.
Okay.
Tell me he didn't put turnout gear on when he went and lit the fire.
Do you want us to tell you that?
Okay.
Did he actually get in the vehicle and move the vehicle?
Oh, yeah, he took it out to a residence.
Drove down to town and started.
Are we gonna
He's been
press
charged.
charges? Okay, thank you.
He's been charged. He's got other mental health issues.
Okay.
Maybe tell the story a little bit, what happened ahead.
Well, from the point he got into the vehicle, he got into it, drove east out of town, drove up Kepper by Hands of Friendship. I understand there was a pad,
Staging board?
yeah, notepad or something that was out, or clipboard type thing. And then he drove back down, started going east again, pulled into a residence, ended up getting out, lighting a Quonset type building that had hay in it on fire, pulled out a tractor and parked it on top of a fish house.
Oh, it's this guy.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
And then
Same.
ended up doing a couple more things in the barn or in the shed, and then went into the house and went into a lower level and started another fire inside the house.
Yeah, no, I remember hearing about that. I wasn't putting the two
Yeah.
together, so, yeah.
Think of the list for the charges you must have had put in there.
Yeah, he had a couple arson charges, motor vehicle theft, everything got charged together, but like I said, he had mental health issues, he was dealt with up in Belle Plaine earlier, was brought down for a medical exam, a mental health assessment, and was released from Mayo, and then was in our community for a bit.
Why would they even release him? I mean, the guy couldn't have passed the test.
Well, they determined he was not a danger to himself or others,
Interesting.
but, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so last thing, so about a week, so I think I put in one of my updates to you all that the community center was looking at doing about $1 million worth of updates this summer, early fall, prior to the new hockey season. They come talk to me about the updates, said that they were working out the financing themselves and they wouldn't necessarily need us. They got financing through First National Bank down there, and Eric signed off on it, and they're all good to go. They went to record it at the county, and Scott County would not record it, because we are the landowner, or landholders, and we did not basically sign off on it. So Eric got a hold of me and asked me if I or someone else at the city was willing to sign off on this, and I said, not necessarily, because said, well, what's our liability? And he said, well, if they, for some reason, have financial hardship, then the city would have the option to pay it down, or it would all be taken. So put the brakes on it. This is about a week ago that I learned from Eric that this county was looking for our signature. And so I talked to Scott Riggs real quick about it. And he said, he kind of looked at it and said, the way the current loan, I guess, is set up, that the city would basically be a guarantor on that loan, and would be liable for some reason if something didn't pay. So we looked back into it, because back in 2011, the community center made a significant amount, I think close to $1 million worth of upgrades. And we were kind of looking into how they did it at that time, because according to Scott, we can't just go take out a loan at the bank. The city has to go through a bonding process. And they didn't go through a bonding process back in 2011. So it looks like back in 2011, the community center basically, instead of putting the land up, put the building up as collateral, and that worked just fine for the bank, and they were able to go through that process. And so my question tonight to you is, do we want to get involved, or how involved do we want to get this, knowing that they want to make upgrades? I'm sure if the city gets involved, they can probably get lower interest rates, but it does sound like 10 years ago, 11 years ago, the city opted not to get that involved, and they were able to go through the whole process and just put the building itself up as collateral instead of the land. So I wanted to know from you guys, how involved does the city potentially want to get with this? If you want to get more involved, Scott said that's fine, but there is a process that we'll have to go through, because we can't just get a loan from the bank.
I can arrange to have the guys come in and explain what they're doing. I mean, it's a pretty sound plan that they got going. And yeah, they figured that they weren't going to need any city participation in it.
And they may not, if we opt to kind of step back and see if they can handle it by putting the building up as collateral like they did 11 years ago. Maybe that is the best option for everybody, because then the city is really hands-off.
Josh, let me just make a couple comments here,
Yeah.
because I was involved in financing when it originally got built.
Okay.
And I was involved with the EDA when we restructured it this last time. And they didn't just put up the building, the actual note was changed to the city of New Prague, actually took out the note.
Okay.
And then another note went to the city community center, so the community center paid the city, and the debt was due to the bank, and therefore the city guaranteed all of the debt. And the city was involved hand in hand with the project when it got built through New Prague, well, actually it was through New Prague Opportunities at the time. And the loans were directly to the two banks, because I was still here way back then when that was done. So two banks got together and shared the loan and agreed to finance the original construction of it through it. When the term got up or had to be renewed, the attorneys felt that that structure wasn't right, so the city had to take the loan out directly, and then the city basically lent the money, although they didn't actually exchange any money, but the community center repaid the city repaid the bank. But
okay. Yeah.
The deal, why it's important is that it couldn't have been done without the full faith and credit of the city of New Prague. And I think you have the same problem now, no matter what you do. You can't just pledge the building, because the building resides on the land. And we can't, as a tax holder, or the city, I don't think, just say, hey, you can have the land and mortgage it. First Bank, if you want to foreclose on the land and the building. And that's not going to work.
And that's what I thought, but when I asked Scott today, he said it's quite common in commercial transactions, and this is my knowledge of how real estate transactions work. Scott stating that they would be able to put the building up. That's why I stated that. But I think you being in the business might know a little bit better. He just meant
you can. I think you can, but then the city's giving up the right to the land if they foreclose.
Even if they put the building up as collateral?
What good is the bill? How are they gonna take the building without owning the land? I mean, what good is the building to the bank? Are we gonna tear it down piece by piece? And
So you're saying as a bank, you would want both, Bruce?
you wanna be able to sell the property.
Yeah,
with the building.
or the city would end up.
You know, if it's a
paying.
Quonset hut, and like you're talking about, you can tear it down and move it and that kind of thing, that's looked at as personal property more or less, but a building, and we have the same issue with American Legion, because I think that's on city land too.
Well,
There's
I-
a few unique situations here in
Yeah, and I
town.
guess the way he described it to me is it was similar to the way condos work, is that you would basically own that space where the building sits, but we would own the land underneath it, and so they would sell off the space where the building sits.
That's not how it's been interpreted before, and I thought Scott might have been the attorney that involved
He said it
with
was
the city
he said it
back
was
then.
before his time, or he said the original one in the '90s was before his
Yeah.
time,
Right.
but that's how they'd kind of worked out.
But you're saying the second time
He,
that they
he
went.
thought he remembers it going that way that I just
Yeah,
described.
I
now.
thought that he might have been the one that actually counseled the city to do it in the way they did it, which was, they took over the loan with the bank.
Well, can I ask you a question then? Most of that loan was based on, refrigerating units under the ice and, the machine, you know, the Gazobi, or below,
Dehumidification.
exactly. And it's kind of important that it gets taken care of, so it's gonna be a situation that we're gonna have to deal with, so if it's gonna be better, can we use the equipment as a collateral, or?
I just can't
Should we
believe
just
it
bring
got-
it into the council
I
and
just
do-
can't believe it got this far along
Yeah, no,
without them realizing there's a problem.
Yeah, it was basically Scott County that put a stop on
They
it.
didn't put a stop to it. It is what it was. They just they just did what they do. But the community center and the bank, obviously, if they did any title work, would have seen that they don't own the property, the building, the land. And that has to be dealt with. That's why I'm surprised it's coming in at the last minute here like this. And I'm sure, you know, over the years, different people got involved in the community center and they lack the history, of what, but it's not a straightforward.
That was
thing to
basically
do.
the answer I got on all the history of the community centers. It's not straightforward. And there was 2 contracts that were, in play, and then they paid off the one, and now they're almost got the second one paid off. So they wanted to, redo the equipment, and, they went to the bank and they got the loan right away. I mean, $1 million just like that. So I don't.
So I guess my question to you is, like, do we want to be involved as a city? Because it sounds like, at least from Bruce's interpretation, that we will need to be involved for them to be able to acquire this money.
Well, we almost have to protect taxpayer interest.
I would think so.
I mean, but, you know, you don't wanna slow down their momentum, but it might.
It might have to be that way though, because, you know, and I was worried about this in the first place. The land is owned by the city. I mean, the city has got to be a part of it, you know? And it's a very legitimate request that they're making, and they have a way to pay it and all of that. But you're gonna at least come in and talk to us, and we're gonna have to sign off on it, so.
And I mean, I guess if the city wants to kind of keep going with this, I'll talk to Scott and, we'll start lining up exactly what the city needs to do to be involved in this, and, I mean, I suppose we could always put the stop on it later if we want, but we can get that ball rolling, cause I know, I'm guessing that they wanna get this work done if they can do it before.
Yeah, they have to.
Fall starts.
They have to before they can even open up for this next season. So yeah, can we at least get them in here and we can go through this together? I mean, let's get it on the agenda on the next meeting and.
Well, I guess I'd like to talk to Scott or the attorney because
Yeah.
if he's telling you, it sounds like he's telling you something different than what he told us back then, which
Yes,
I'd have to understand why
Yeah,
that
he's
is.
telling us at this point that we'll kind of have to go through a bond process to be able to borrow the money, is what Scott shared with me.
Well, if he did the last deal and didn't go through a bond, I'm not sure what he means by a bond process, but it was direct financing with a bank.
Okay, well, I will talk to Scott and I can get him on the agenda for the next meeting. And we
And I
can.
want to think it was Community Security Bank, maybe.
Oh,
Yeah, I can't remember if it
Get
was
this lined up as
2011,
fast
I
as possible.
don't remember,
I-
but I would have been just new on the board. But
I didn't know that they did that.
I'm not even sure, what does the city own, just the land?
Just the land.
just
yeah.
the land.
Well, it's a very successful, very thing that the city should be proud of because of the way it was done and the volunteer effort. And the city had to be involved to get the Mighty Ducks grant. That was material in it. and there's a lot of volunteer labor and volunteer dollars that were donated, so it's a,
It is certainly one of those feathers in the caps for the public-private partnership.
but the city had to be involved in, from the beginning, and
Yep, no, it's gotta be a total joint powers thing. That's why I sit on it. That's why the school board sits on it. So it's, I would like to, they really do need it. I mean, this has gotta happen, and they got all the details worked out, and it's not gonna cost the city, and they really should be proud of that skating rink. I mean, the participation of all residents of this state come tournament time pile into these cities. We should actually consider getting another sheet of ice, but, let's get this part through and,
Yeah.
but just to come back to your comment, I mean, if there's a way that Scott feels that we do not have to be involved in the legal obligation of it, that we're just gonna give up the land if they foreclose, that's something we can consider.
Yeah, and say, he,
I guess I'd be open to that.
he was of the opinion that we would not have to be involved and we would still be able to retain the land. That's where I got that from him.
Okay,
But
well, I'm not gonna stop, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
slow anything down if we have a legal opinion that says that.
I'll talk to him to confirm that that's actually what he means, and if for some reason it's not, then I will talk with him about getting that ball rolling, so that way we can try to keep them on track.
Yep.
With it still coming back to us, obviously, before anything would ever happen.
And I don't know, you know, what's gone on over the last few years, but I'm not aware of any kind of a condominium legal structure or anything out there that actually says they own the physical building. It's really understood that, but I'm not aware of any legal thing on public record.
Okay.
Maybe, unless, Ken, maybe you are. Is there any legal record that there's a condominium unit in place or a?
Well, I know there can be foreclosures on, obviously, condo units.
Right, but is there any kind of structure right now on that property? I don't think.
I don't
there
believe
is.
so.
On that property.
No, I don't, not on that property, no.
So if Scott's thinking there is, I don't think there is that kind of an arrangement there.
Okay.
They'd have to plat it.
Yep.
Right?
It's already platted as Community Center Edition, Lot 1, Block 1.
Right, but if you condominiumized it, if that's a
Then it
word,
would be a-
you'd have to plat
You
it.
could do a CIC plat, they call it common
Yep.
interest community plat, and then divide up, you know,
Right.
footprint of the building, and then probably have a common element around, I don't know exactly how they would define that, maybe.
So I'm just saying that, I don't think that's there, and
No.
we'd have to do that. But they would have to do that.
Does the city still have to own that land because of that Minnesota Mighty Duck grant?
that's almost completed. Even if we did,
Because why don't we just sell the land to the
committee,
committee?
and then they wouldn't have to have us on there.
Yeah, then the city's out.
Well,
But
we
then,
probably
didn't
have
the
to-
school fund part of the building itself?
No, they have a lease agreement. They have an agreement which agrees that they're gonna buy so much ice time or so much time. I can't recall.
Right.
In 2011, I think the addition was for lockers or expansion. of the
Right,
building.
locker room, yep, they put
And
a
that's
locker
where the
room.
school wanted that. So the school agreed a long-term lease, which allowed them to get the financing for it, because that's how they paid the loan back.
Oh, I see.
And at this point, I wonder if they might push back on owning the land, only in that if they ever want to go after another Mighty Ducks grant, or if one comes available, if it requires another public.
Entity.
I don't think we wanna do that, guys.
But, okay, I will explore that further and try to keep the ball rolling while not letting it roll too far.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
That is all I've got.
Okay, Maggie?
I don't have anything.
Sean?
Just a question to Ken, and I was gonna bring up some of the lawns situation out there that I've been hearing about, but, one that's, those green tubes that are sitting over on Lexington and.
Oh,
Yeah.
How
yeah.
do we get those out of there?
What's the
I'm hoping
status
he's-
on that?
One of them, the letter went out to mow that thing first, but.
Yes, we sent a letter to Mo on
Can
that
we
one.
store those-
The green tubes, there's really nothing we can do to that.
They can just keep it, there, that's not a,
It's a technically a construction site, cause they've got an open permit to do water and sewer in there. I don't think they've proceeded on that at this point, but
When does that close or up,
Yeah.
or how many times can we issue
is
a
that
permit?
I'll have to look into that. I don't have an answer
You know,
for
wasn't
you.
it a conditional use permit?
No, it was not a conditional use permit. We had granted a variance down there,
Oh,
but that was not a
variance, that's right.
condition
Okay.
of the variance for that.
So, yeah, I guess that would be a question, because, I mean, it keeps going and going and going, and him, it'll keep going and going.
Yep. Yeah, and they're not considered refuse because they're still construction materials at this
Yes.
point. I've gone over that with Scott Riggs on a couple of different occasions. Same with the gravel rock.
Yeah, but
Not
how that got spread all of a sudden,
that did, yep.
you know, and,
Yeah, I'll look into the pipe thing, but when I talked to Scott before, he said, no,
but he
it's
did
not
mow it.
refuse.
I saw it get mowed over the weekend,
Okay, good.
Oh, did it? Oh, I
Yeah.
haven't driven by it, so.
Yeah, 'cause I walked past it and I was like, okay.
you know.
Beautification.
Anything else, Sean?
Well, no,
Okay.
I mean, I don't care if, even if we gave him the ability to keep those pipes in one of our facilities or something and, you
I
know.
don't know that we want to do that.
I just want them out of there, not
Well,
me, cause
yeah. Well,
I don't
it's-
like driving by it, but I don't have to live next to it like several other people
Yep,
do that.
and that's just, yeah,
Yeah, we were told repeatedly last year, that it would be going in the ground in the next couple weeks and just never happened.
That seems to be his method of
Yeah, and
operation.
at this point,
with
like Matt
everything.
said, we might actually be able to call it refuse because we would not let that go in the ground.
yeah, because that sat out in the sun and,
That PVC pipe cannot sit outside for more than a month.
correct,
Oh, really?
yeah, because the ultraviolet light,
Oh,
So maybe I can call it refuse now.
okay,
so.
perfect. That was all I had.
I don't have anything because the city administrator addressed mine. So, Bruce? You have anything?
Oh, just the IT risk assessment status?
Oh,
where we're
how's
at
that
with
going?
Just the status of the risk assessment, is that done, or?
Yeah, the risk assessment got done, and CTS will be coming in front of you to give kind of a brief overview of the findings and path forward. It'll tie in more with our budget process, so we will bring them in. I was tentatively planning within the next month to bring them in to do that. But it will tie heavily into our budgeting moving forward.
Yeah, I guess we'd like to see it
Yep.
promptly whenever it's done.
Yeah, it is done. We could send that out, but we wanted to give an explanation with it, and CTS is willing to do that, so.
That's all I got.
The only thing I got is, they noticed that you took down the, where was that, a traffic counter you had up, chained up onto the pole down there and first?
Yes, I
And-
will be processing that data. I believe tomorrow I have it on my calendar,
Okay,
to do
because
that.
they're super happy you did that right away like that. They were impressed. So kudos.
I was wondering why you were doing it.
There was a question whether a crosswalk is gonna be needed because there was some elderly that tried to get across there, and it is. If you go during the rush hour time period, you'll see everybody going, just cruising by there, and
And we-
them old people, I mean, they're not as quick as what they need to be on that one.
And we counted 1 week before school ended and then another week following school ending, so we can have, we can look at the
Good.
data before and after and kind of see how that
As
affected
soon
it
as you
too.
get it, I'll get it to them,
Yep.
and then they'll be happy.
And I'll be sharing that with the police chief and Public Works as well.
Cool.
When we have that done.
Fire chief.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Nothing? Okay. Now it looks like we gotta go into a closed session.
Yes, real quick to talk about the, ambulance facility.
Okay. So, okay. So I would take a motion to adjourn the regular council meeting.
So what we were doing, since this is part of the meeting, you're just taking a motion to go into closed meeting.
Okay,
And then we can move everybody out, and then after the closed
I'll
meeting.
take a
we'll come
motion to
back
go
and
into
adjourn the
closed
meeting.
meeting.
So moved, second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Motion by Rick, second by Sean. Any, discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, guys.
And thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, everybody.